Welcome in Lineup Logic. You are listening to the live stream for NFL Week 6. I'm Mike Alexander. With me, Josh Fern, as usual. Fern, what's up, man?
Oh man, not much, Mike. Not much. Just glad it's Friday. Long week at the office, but we're here once again, week 6.
Yes, sir. Interesting week on tap here. A lot of the favored plays are kind of missing with the Sunday night, the Monday night, the Thursday night games, and guys like Todd Gurley that are on it are hitting the high points of the pricing spectrum. So um, a lot to unpack this week. We talked about before we went on here, kicking it off with a little "Does defense matter?" talk. That's the buzz in the industry at the moment. Kicked off by Josh Hermsmeyer, the air yards guy. You may know him. He basically came out and said defenses don't matter when it comes to projecting offense. The offense is all he cares about. So I'll give you my take. You give me your take, and we'll see where we stand. I understand what he's saying. If you try to incorporate defenses into a model, you're not going to have any better results than you would have had just focusing on the offense, things like targets, things that are slightly more projectable. Obviously, he's very big on air yards. Those are projectable. They tend to have a strong correlation game to game and year to year. So I get where he's coming from. I also get the backlash he's facing with people saying, if you play the Falcons with James Conner 100 times, you can't have the same outcomes as playing the Eagles 100 times with James Conner. It's just there is a component to that. So I see both sides. I get what Josh is saying. He came off a little bit abrasive, I think, in putting it out there, but that's his style on Twitter. He gives no F's about anybody else's opinion. I tweeted it out. The two really smart things I saw people put out were Sammy Reed on his timeline. He put out about how this is really similar in his eyes to some of the early metrics for baseball back in like the 80s, when like FIP started becoming popular. And does the pitcher own the stats? What can he do? And at the time, people were coming out with all the pitcher really controls is home runs, strikeouts, walks. Everything else, has a fielding dependence to it. And that's kind of similar to what we're seeing here is, we don't understand yet what defense's true role is stat wise, because stats are like in their infancy stage when it comes to the NFL. What's your take on it, Fern? Where do you fall on the DDM spectrum?
Yeah, I definitely am a strong believer in using analytics, putting a lot of emphasis on stats, but at the same time not drowning in them. And to an extent, I agree. Like, defense doesn't matter in the big part of the bell curve. The large portion of NFL defenses, some are better than others, some are worse than others, but from a fantasy perspective, it's negligible. On the tails, though, the extreme ends, defense matters. On the tail ends of any like group of data, the tail ends matter. And so in the sense of NFL defenses, your extremes, the elite defenses, and every year you're not going to have like truly elite decade best defenses. Mm-hmm. And on the other side of things, you're not going to always have truly epically horrible defenses. So I think that's like the key is if a defense compared to like historically speaking, stands the test of recent years, like the last 5 years, the last 10 years, like this defense is like, early 2000s Ravens, like early 2010s Broncos, etc. I mean, that's when I really, really, really take pause. But, a good defense is not going to completely deter me, especially in tournaments. from using an outstanding, talented player. In fact, it would attract me more for using that player because I think talent in the sense of offensive players can supersede, a good defense. Right. So I'm not going to get scared away by like an above average good defense. But, historically speaking, when we have an elite defense, one of the top 5 in the last decade, for example, like that's when I really get scared off. So I guess the short of it is like you got to be really, really damn good as a team defense to scare me away. Not really worried about cornerback matchups. The one thing that really terrifies me is, do they have a couple of elite edge rushers? And that's what really I think matters ultimately when we're looking at DFS plays is, can they rush the quarterback? And if they can to an extremely elite capacity, then, I'm a little worried there. So that makes sense.
It was an interesting case study this week because we had Jacksonville facing Kansas City, and that was kind of the impetus for this all, which side's going to win out. And I think you would say offense won out, but like the studs didn't give you week winning performance. Like Mahomes actually had one of his worst lines of the season. And like they went up early. So, Jacksonville was playing from behind. So kind of it didn't really give us the answer I think most people were hoping for. But I think you hit on a really good point. The ends, those top 3 defenses, those bottom 3 defenses, those are the ones that you can make a personal adjustment for. And ultimately you're the best analysis tool out there. You're going to take the inputs that you can come up with, put them through your brain, and you're going to come up with your plays. So having a good process is really the foundation for me, and looking at good source material, and you'll make good decisions over the long run, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that like, at the end of the day, it's, what type of player are you? If you're strictly a cash player, then there's really no sense in getting cute and trying to, jam in a talented player against a good defense, but if you're a big tournament player, I'm pretty much, zero cash. I'm all about tournaments. And that's one of my favorite things to do is, identify a high usage, highly talented player, going against a good defense, a perceived good defense, and just catching that ownership leverage. Just case in point, last night, your Eagles dominated that game, but Saquon Barkley is a generational talent.
Generational spirit is the quote from
I love that. What is a generational spirit? That's like some quote from like a Chinese proverb that was like poorly.
I think he just got caught like flat-footed and was like, I kind of wish we had taken a quarterback and that I weren't losing most of the games this year. Although I'm not sure a quarterback would have changed that.
Yeah. But yeah, so I guess sometimes talent just wins the day, but it's again, it's like, it's all how you play. If you are trying to mitigate risk, then yeah, you definitely want to consider the opposing defense. But if risk is something that you embrace, then, run into the storm, so to speak.
Yeah. And another good angle I saw put out there is it's hard to get better than what Vegas is projecting. And, take Bears Dolphins, for example. The Dolphins are projected for 19 points in that game. Like there's production somewhere on that team. They're not going to all put up single digit fantasy days or zeros. Somebody's going to score a touchdown. There might even be 3 people that score a touchdown. So that's kind of, I think, where a lot of people are falling back on projection models that obviously rely very heavily with Vegas totals. So. But speaking of, why don't we jump into some Vegas totals? You wanted to talk a little bit of line movement and some of what's happened this week.
So just looking at the slate of games, just from an implied total perspective, we've got 5 teams as of now implied to score under 20 points. Starting at the bottom, we got the Bills, Cardinals, Cowboys, the Dolphins, and the Titans. Are those teams just 100% fadeable? I mean, I'm not touching them in cash. Probably not touching them in tournaments, given the fact that I'm a one lineup kind of guy. Occasionally 3, 2, maybe, but typically it's 1 or 3. There's really no reason for me to touch those. So if you're like me and you play limited lineups, you play cash primarily, single entry tournaments, there's really not much to see there. Definitely nothing in the Bills. You could maybe hope and pray with David Johnson or Zeke Elliott. I mean, the Dolphins, Ryan Tannehill is throwing interceptions like it's his job. And the Bears are just a devastating unit. And then the Titans, you have no idea what to expect from them. Could they put up some points against the Ravens? Anything's possible, but I don't like it against this, at least in the 2018 season, outstanding pass defense that the Ravens boast. So before I look at some higher total games, I don't know if you have any takes on some of these doo-doo implied total teams.
I feel like David Johnson's a bit of a fade for me. You're counting on touchdown dependency there, with probably a very pedestrian stat line that coaching staff has got zero creativity, especially with him. Like, you look at his next gen stats page and it's just rushes right up the middle for 3 yards.
It's so heartbreaking. I saw that tweet. I can't remember who initially sent that out, but everything was between the hash marks, and it was just it's like
little passing game.
Oh my gosh, it's so sad.
So that's one that I think is a bit of a trap, because his price is good, sure, but it's risky. I don't mind Zeke as much, given that he will get just huge usage, and he's got a lot more stability week to week, I think, even in bad matchups.
Yeah. Other than that, I guess maybe you might take a flyer on like maybe Corey Davis. But again, this, when I say that, like, that is if you are running, right, dozens and dozens of
25, 50 lineups.
Yeah. Like, there's a threshold that you have to cross before you start considering these players. And if your lineups are in the single digits, there's really no upside. You can differentiate with a team that's implied for greater scoring. But of course, out of these 5 teams, it's not going to be surprising at all for one guy to score 20 points that's not named David Johnson or Zeke Elliott. Moving up to the top of the totem pole here, I guess. There are 5 teams implied to score 26 or more points. Leading the pack is Atlanta, 30 points. The Rams are just inching up there at 29. Tampa Bay at 27. And the Bengals and Vikings are both at 26. Kind of rounding just to the whole number there. Technically the Vikings at 26.8 and the Bengals at 26 on the nose. Just my take on these situations here. I definitely am buying those Atlanta and LA totals. I think that, the Rams are as much of a lock as you can get for scoring 4 touchdowns worth of points. Will they score 4 touchdowns? It's likely, going against this perceived decent Broncos defensive unit that is not a good defensive unit.
Right. Yeah. They're getting coming up for the
offensive team. And then the Falcons, just historically against Tampa Bay, are as close of a lock as you can get to scoring 3 to 4 touchdowns. So before we move into a couple of those other teams there, what do you think about Atlanta and the Rams?
Yeah, so the Rams, I think there's a nice kind of convergence of factors coming with you've got them facing the Broncos, who do have like a little bit of a rep as a good defense and at home. Uh, I don't I don't think, the Rams are going to be peak Rams like we saw at home against Minnesota, but they just scored how many points in Seattle? 30, which is a tough place to play, and still a defense that has some teeth. They're not what they were, but they're not a pushover. And there's also 2 to 3 inches of snow in the forecast, which people freak out about weather in DFS. Like you saw with the Monday night game, everybody was like, "Oh, scoring's going to be down. Scoring's going to be down," and it hit the over easily without having to really involve fourth quarter scoring. So, you could get some decent ownership on Rams players where it would have been higher given a neutral field and good weather.
Yeah, on the weather, I believe it was Chris Raybon, might have been Jonathan Bales. It's one of those smart guys that do, big longitudinal studies. And basically the only weather that matters truly in DFS, NFL DFS, is wind, is sustained
high wind.
That's it. Yep. So for those of you that see rain in the forecast, some snow, I mean, obviously like heavy snow, but that's rare, right. But if you see rain, if you see a little windy conditions, don't really let it deter you from using pieces in that game. I guess one other weather to consider, but now we don't really have to worry about it, is extreme heat. And one of the biggest edges is like if the Patriots are going down to Miami in early September, because historically they've struggled going down to Miami in early September. But I guess that might be more of like a sports betting angle than a DFS angle.
Right. Yeah, you get a little drained there.
It's kind of like stacking in baseball against Steven Strasburg pitching in a hot day game. He's used to that mild Southern California.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's jump into Bucks Falcons. I like the Falcons side here. Like you said, they're the highest total. Matt Ryan is expensive, Julio's expensive, but it comes with some pretty solid floor of production and good upside as well. Julio actually scores touchdowns against the Bucks. I like their peripheral weapons as well. Ridley, Sanu, Hooper, all kind of interesting. On the Bucks side, man, I've been saying it all week. I'm just too afraid of Jameis, especially in game one. Like everybody thinks that getting him into comeback mode is a good thing and going to equate to points, and it definitely could. It could also equate to just an absolute disaster because the Bucks spent a good part of last season chasing, and half the year he was awful and just turned the ball over and couldn't connect deep. And then the second half of the year he was way better at it. You just don't know who you're going to get, and people are like, "Oh, his price, the scoring, he's a cash lock." Like that's not the definition of a cash lock to me. Like Matt Ryan is a cash lock. Like he's got a way better chance of having a minimum production that's gonna win you cash lineups. Jameis Winston could give you like a 12 and sink your entire team. What do you think on Winston?
Oh yeah. And I'm sure, well, I guess, maybe a good way to approach this show is just to get all of the players in this Tampa Bay and Atlanta game out of the way first, and then, do our viewers a favor and not hit softballs with talking about a lot of these guys, break down positions. But, I tweeted earlier that I feel like Cameron Brate and Austin Hooper are two of the easiest fades for me. And then I'll get to Winston in a second. And it's kind of the same mentality here is, well, I guess it's maybe not exactly the same. As far as tight end goes, I mean, it's such a volatile position. And, as everyone that plays season long knows, is unless you're getting like Kelsey or Ertz, or Gronk, I mean, everything else kind of just mushes together.
Mhm.
from like the tight end 4 or 5 all the way down to like the tight end 13 or 14. It's kind of mushed together. And the same goes with DFS tight ends is, there's really not a great edge you can get for, going after the chalk tight end because just the variance that's built into the position. It's very
Yes.
rare that you find a tight end that gets schemed into the game plan. And, unfortunately for everybody that has put all their weight behind Cameron Brate and Austin Hooper, the two
Mhm.
of them don't really get schemed in purposefully to the game
Right.
plan. And that's what builds in a lot of that risk.
Yeah,
So,
so I think it was somebody from Number Fire. They put out a tweet with the top percentages, and I guess it was like the Millie Maker or something by tight end each week, and it was just like bust after bust.
mhm.
I think week one it was like decent. I forget who the chalk was week one. Might have been Ertz, but
Yeah,
the highest owned the rest of the time. Like Ebron in there when he had a dud. Um, just a bunch of guys that like you're trying to be smart and tricky like everybody else, and you end up just pissing away ownership.
absolutely. So as far as that chalk goes, I mean, I am definitely like it's Friday night. I already know. Like I'm not using Brait or Hooper.
Hmm.
It's just not a hard decision for me
Right,
without
but with only a
Ertz,
couple lineups, yeah.
without Ertz, without Kelsey, without Gronk. Um, it's just really not a hard call for me to just go away from that chalk because odds are everything else is going to kind of, mush together. And I'm just going to look for an ownership pivot. And I kind of like the fact that Eric Ebron gets wide receiver 1 targets. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But going back to the original point is Jameis.
Mhm.
And Jameis is getting so much love. It is extremely uncomfortable for me,
Mhm.
given the fact that his price is extremely palatable. The matchup is, I mean, I'm not even going to say it's perceived as good. It is a great matchup. This Atlanta
Yeah.
secondary is definitely targetable. But you know what? Like, it's a divisional game. It's his first start back after his hiatus.
Yeah.
And I have pause here. Like, I don't think that he's going to put a complete dud out there, but just assuming that, I mean, I'm pretty certain he's going to be 15 to 20% owned in a lot of
Mhm.
contests. And I just don't see him having that 30-point game in him. I mean, I could see Jared Goff having a 30-point game against the Broncos and him being, mid single digit ownership.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's more expensive than Jameis, but that pivot and just that proven efficiency is what attracts me more to a lot of these other options. So it's really not that hard for me to imagine fading him. That said, I don't think he's going to put up a complete dud,
Yeah, but I see him doing something like 285, 2-2, like two touchdowns, two interceptions, and
exactly.
just like you know getting you close, but not close enough. And
Yeah, and the other thing too that worries me a bit is that he's like, I mean, I just said it, but like his salary. Okay, so and we'll get to these pieces in a minute here, but there's a lot of high end players that people are going to want to jam in this week. I know Gurley is really expensive. It's the first time we've seen him at I think he's 10K on DraftKings,
yeah, yep.
and I think he's 9,500 on FanDuel. I mean, he's super expensive, but I mean, it's still a great play. People are going to want to jam him in because he's just a lock for like 25 points
Yeah,
every week.
yeah.
And
I'm
people
fine
are
with
going
it.
to want to jam in Julio, and they're going to want to get, Mike Evans in there, perhaps. Like they're going to want to get Melvin Gordon in there, Christian McCaffrey, perhaps. And so Jameis is just going to be that like default quarterback
That opens
option.
up.
And it's just I can see so many avenues that people are going to take that lead them to Jameis. And in tournaments, it's I mean, I don't see how I can, roster him with full confidence, knowing, like what you said, Mike, that he does have that mediocre 285, 2 game that's really not going to blow the doors off of anything. And I just pivoting makes so much sense to me.
Yeah,
I like
this game actually worries me as a whole a little bit. I said it on the pod earlier in the week. Like their last 4 meetings have been pretty ugly. Like, I think the last one was 16-17. Like it's a divisional game. They hate each other. They play hard. It's hotly contested. So, it's not a lock that this thing goes into the upper 50s points wise.
Yeah, definitely. And on the Atlanta side of things, though,
yeah, I'm good with Atlanta.
Really having a hard time not having Julio Jones on one of my rosters. I know, I mean, on my roster, I know that it's like hashtag Julio's washed up or whatever the hell you want to say. I don't know. There's so much ridiculous, these crazy takes out there that he's like washed up.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see what his ownership is going to be, because there's so many people that can't stand him, but it's such a like natural spot to use.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at ownership projections in a variety of places, and I mean, one of my favorite ownership projections that I like to refer to is the UF Collective, and they have him at 35% on FanDuel, and they're really accurate, very accurate. But I have a feeling that he's going to be lower owned than that. I think that in lower dollar tournaments, I could see Julio being higher owned in the higher dollar tournaments, because I think the sharper players know, like, he's getting these elite air yards. I mean, he's getting elite targets. He's converting, these targets into receptions and yardage. He's not getting in the end zone. And historically speaking, against Tampa Bay, he owns them. Like, since 2014, he averages 26 fantasy points a game against Tampa Bay and 34 a game when playing them at home. I got that from Scott Barrett, and I don't know. It's really hard for me to not have Julio in my lineup. That's my favorite piece in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to have him or Gurley, because they're the guys that can get 25, 30 points on this slate, and without it, you're up, fighting a battle uphill.
Yeah. Now I do think you can get them both in there. The question is, where can you save in other places? And if we're fading, if I'm fading Jameis, and if I'm fading Brait, then it's going to be tricky. But there are a few spots, and we can talk about those as we move on.
All right. Any other games in these high totals that you want to talk about?
Well, there is that Pittsburgh and Cincinnati game. The Atlanta Tampa Bay game is leading the way. And then the Rams and Broncos and Pittsburgh and Cincinnati are both at 51. The difference, though, is that Atlanta and Tampa Bay, the total has moved up half a point, while the Broncos and Rams have moved down a point, and the Bengals and Steelers have actually tanked 3 points since the open. And you and I were talking before we went live, and it's possible, pretty likely, I think, that Cincinnati Steelers game can be a divisional bloodbath.
Yeah, that's, that tends to happen in that rivalry. The one kind of silver lining for me in that is neither team is really playing defense this season. Like, they're both in a bad place defensively. They're giving up tons of plays, tons of production, and their offenses have been getting it done on the other side. So there's a chance it gets close to that, or even hits the over. But yeah, I think you're not seeing a smokescreen with the potential that people are going to target this game and be left wanting.
Mhm. Yeah, if I'm looking at one of these three games, I'm probably looking first at the Rams. I just really love what Sean McVay does. With just concentrating the uh, production into just a few players. It's such a
Hmm.
predictable offense. I mean, not only is it highly efficient, but it's just so predictable. Um, it's extremely unlikely. Like, and when I say extremely, it's like a 1% chance that like Tyler Higbee or some rando
Yeah.
joker is going to blow up and have a game.
Right.
Like it's going to go through the big four guys, Gurley and Cooper Cup and Cooks and Woods. I mean, it's going to go through them. And so it's a very stackable team. I feel like if I'm playing multiple lineups, it's not possible for me to not have a 4-man Ram stack.
Right.
But so that's my favorite way to look at these 6 teams who are in these high total games is stacking the Rams, getting pieces of Tampa Bay and Atlanta, not really stacking that thing, just getting pieces, definitely Julio. And
Yep.
then I mean, I'm not going to fall over myself to roster Cincinnati and Pittsburgh pieces, but those two teams are really interesting. Like I love Tyler Boyd. I love Juju, Connor, Nixon. But I don't know. It's a divisional game, so it concerns me.
What's your least favorite game from a scoring standpoint?
Hmm, that's a good question.
Got Jacksonville, Dallas to pick from.
I feel like
Bills.
some people are going to be attracted to this Redskins and uh, Panthers game. Um, I feel like the Panthers side of things. I mean, it's really not news that the Panthers side is going to be the favored side in DFS. Um, that Saints Redskins Monday night game, I wouldn't put a whole lot of weight into it. I know that the Redskins are extremely low on the DVOA side of things for stopping the run,
Mhm.
but they have a good defensive unit, and I know like Drew Brees and the Saints carved them up like a Thanksgiving turkey, but outside of that, that's been a pretty good defensive unit this year. The Panthers play at a low pace. And so I could see, people going after Cam Newton and Christian McCaffrey and being disappointed a bit.
Yeah, and these are two coaches that I think don't mind just playing old-fashioned, boring
Yes,
football. Like the
absolutely.
Panthers scored points last week out of necessity. I don't think that's their preferred route.
Yeah. And then one other team that I could see disappointing people is the Chargers going against the Browns. They're going across the country, playing the 1 o'clock game in Cleveland. And the Browns are legit. Like, they're a legit football team.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Like, I know that, you know, like it's still like this hangover in people's minds of if they're the Cleveland Browns and they're garbage, but their defense has been pretty solid this year. I know that they had that shootout with the Raiders, and that kind of thing happens from time to time. But I think that they can give the Chargers some trouble, and so like will Melvin Gordon get his high usage? Definitely, but I don't think that it is very certain that the Chargers can come over there into Cleveland and light them up for 3 or 4 touchdowns. So I think that could be a little bit of a disappointment as well.
Yeah, I'm interested in that one because I think a lot of people are buying the Browns all of a sudden, and like you said, the west to east narrative too. So I think you could get some solid ownership on guys like Rivers and Gordon. But yeah, not going to be my core. Definitely just some people to mix in.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, I will say this, and then we can move on if you want to. Is Every single week this season, like every week on FanDuel, I've had Melvin Gordon and Todd Gurley in my main lineup, and it's probably going to happen again. I just feel like there's such a certainty with those two guys, such a level of comfort with those two guys. And yeah, I've missed out on, like I missed out on James Conner last week. I missed out on Christian McCaffrey running for 180 yards on 20 whatever carries a couple weeks ago. But yes, I do think that the Chargers could somewhat disappoint. I do agree that there's going to be some ownership to be had there on those pieces on the San Diego, on the LA Chargers side of things. But yeah, like on FanDuel, it's just so tempting and it's so easy to just jam Gurley and Gordon in every week.
Yep. And then real quick before we hit the positions, Rock wants to know what we think about Wilson, Lockett, Baldwin stacks. I mean, it's in London, Rock. I'm not sure if you're aware, but London games just worry me, man. Like there's been scoring, but it's hard to tell who's going to do it and which side. I can't remember either of these teams playing in London recently. So you got that, like there's the travel, there's the you're in a new place with new food. A lot of these guys are creatures of habit and everything's just, thrown off for them. So it's not a bad stack, Rock. I think as far as stacks go, but Baldwin only getting one catch last week. That worries me a lot as well, but that could lead to some really nice ownership for you, and you're going to get him where maybe it was just a fluke. He only got the one catch. All of a sudden, he gets back to his regular involvement, and he did talk a lot this week about I believe what he said was any receiver would be disappointed with only one catch. So I thought that was a really good way of handling it. Like, he made it clear he was not pleased, but he didn't call anyone out or make it ugly.
Yeah. Maybe he gets the squeaky wheel treatment. It's possible. But if I'm targeting any pieces in that game, I mean, it all starts with Chris Carson for me.
Yeah.
I think that he's going to ball out. I've got him in a couple dynasty leagues.
He's basically gone 100 yards the last two games.
Yeah,
and the Raiders suck.
You were talking, Mike, about old school 80s, 90s football, with the Redskins and Panthers, and I feel like going across the pond over to London, playing a cupcake run defense in Oakland, it would behoove the Seahawks to just feed Carson, but of course, Mike James could come in there and I don't know what the hell that's all about, but yeah. I think Davis. Chris Carson is the quintessential bell cow.
Yeah, I would swap Baldwin for Carson in that stack, Rock. Go Wilson, Lockett, Carson, because Lockett's been heavily involved. He's scoring touchdowns. They've loved him there ever since they drafted him, and just that freak injury 2 years ago and not being back from it last season really limited him. So
yeah, maybe even Nick Vannett.
Yeah,
I don't know.
As far as TD hunting at tight end, it's not the worst play.
Yeah.
But let's hit quarterbacks. Give me a couple guys we haven't talked about yet for a QB.
Yeah. So obviously, everybody. I mean, I would say the combined ownership on Matt Ryan and Jameis is going to be like a third of the field in a lot of the lower dollar tournaments.
Yep.
I mentioned before Jared Goff. I love Goff. He's so efficient. This offense is just like a well-oiled machine. And again, like in lower dollar tournaments, $10 and under, maybe $5 and under. I could see him being, outside of the top 5 in ownership, because I think the public still perceives Denver as being a good pass defense, but they're not. This is not a good pass defense anymore. And so I think that is a very targetable matchup there, a nice little stack with Gurley, Goff, and you pick a receiver.
Yep.
I also, I think Cam is always an option. Will the game be boring and low scoring? I think it's likely. I do. However, he just runs the ball so much and his floor is so high. And so I've always, felt Cam has had a little space every week in my player pool. Will I use him every week? No. I mean, I'd probably use him 2 or 3 times a year, but he's always got a high floor. And then one more guy that interests me, and then I'll throw it back to you. I guess I mean there's really not much. Like my quarterback pool is really small this week. I guess I mean I kind of like your call about Phillip Rivers. I mean he's having such an amazing season. He's so efficient this year.
He's good against pressure as well, which the Browns love to bring pressure. Until he's not. There is the occasional game where he just gets planted on his ass and he Marmadukes the ball all over the place.
Yeah. Quarterback. I think this week quarterback.
Be safe. Yeah.
Every week there's always a quarterback that just comes out of nowhere. There's always a player at every position that comes out of nowhere. I mean, you can bank on talent and you can say, I don't know about Kirk Cousins against Arizona. Arizona is not a plus matchup for any quarterback this year. They're definitely limiting opposing quarterbacks pretty well. I mean, Andrew Luck against the Jets, maybe like the amount of volume that the Colts.
Yeah, like I don't mind either guy in that Jets game because like you're about to say the volume that the Colts play with could just equal a lot of attempts on both sides.
Yeah, and that could be a game where you could game stack that game. And I mean, if you're going in like a massive tournament, I mean, that could be like a really sneaky game stack, maybe like Luck and, Eric Ebron and what the hell's Chester Rogers, perhaps. And then maybe like Robbie Anderson and, Isaiah Crowell, like running it back. I mean, those are.
I actually like the other side. I would go Darnold, Anunwa, and Robbie Anderson, and then run it back with somebody like Ebron.
Or what's the other receiver's name?
Ryan Grant.
No, God, fucking Ryan Grant from the
Jermaine Kearse on the.
No,
the Jets.
Oh my God, on the Colts, Pierre or some French name. I don't know.
Not sure.
These are not players that I will be rostering because I just don't. I mean, if it was like a single game situation, like sure, but
right.
Now we're getting into Jeremy territory, which I wish Jeremy was with us, but I feel like Jeremy is one of the guys that runs like a bunch of lineups. I don't know.
Yeah. And then the one quarterback we didn't talk about that I kind of like, at least from a GPP standpoint, is Baker Mayfield. I think the Chargers defense, they're without Joey Bosa, they've been fairly toothless. They were better last week, but that was at home against the Raiders. Like, everybody's better at home against the Raiders. So, Mayfield, it's only his 3rd start. So like he's making strides. He's got a good, crew around him, especially if the Chargers can push the issue a little bit and score some points on their end and force the Browns to keep pace or stay ahead.
For sure. And then, of course, neither of us – I didn't mean to cut you off, but neither mentioned Roethlisberger or Andy Dalton.
Yeah. Andy scares me.
Yeah, ditto.
Roethlisberger, you could get him because there's that, Ben is no good on the road narrative, but I don't know. I feel like this is kind of like a James Conner, Joe Mixon game between these two. But let's transition that to running backs. Who do you like at running back, Fern?
Oh man, well, I mean, I love Todd Gurley and Melvin Gordon. You know, every week I love those guys.
Team cram
Um,
them in.
yeah, jam them in, man. I think T.J. Yeldon is going to be really popular this week.
Yeah.
Now,
I wish Sean Lee were back for the Cowboys because that would be such a trap, I think, with Yeldon. But with no Sean Lee, they're better than they were last year without him, but they're still like they can't cover backs and they get run on a little bit.
right. Yeah. So I do think he's going to be popular. The volume is going to be a little questionable. But I don't think he really needs a ton of rush volume because he's so involved in the pass game
Right.
as well. So I think he's a pretty safe play. So if you're trying to pay down a bit and not get too cute, I think he's a really safe play. And then, I don't want to steal too much of the options here for you to touch on. One guy, I mean, this is not a guy that I'm like considering, but one guy that I'm waiting for him to get right is Jordan Howard.
I was just thinking that, yeah.
Where are you?
Yep, yeah, the Dolphins, you can run on them for sure.
So yeah, you can, and he's so freaking cheap. On FanDuel, he's 6,200.
And when he blows up big, like 202 touchdowns.
Absolutely. Like, what is the deal? Like, it just blows my mind. Maybe like
it could just be new offense. They're all getting acclimated to each other, and the passing game got right last time we saw them. Maybe it's the running game's turn.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like Jordan Howard, and oh my God, I just drew a blank on his name, Tariq Cohen. That can be kind of like a situation like, I don't know, like Bilal Powell and Isaiah Crowell,
right?
Where,
well-worn thunder and lightning.
Yeah, and like maybe they are like rosterable on the same lineup in some crazy GPP stat. I don't know, but
it's becoming more popular. Like a lot of people are liking the Gordon Eckler stack because they get such usage.
Right.
Cohen Howard could be another one.
Yeah, I used Eckler last week on DraftKings, and he did quite well. And in hindsight, I mean, you could have used them both, and gotten good value out of them. But again, like this is similar to quarterback. Is there someone that's going to pop down low? There always is. But
yeah,
I'm not going to really get too cute here. I mean, the farthest down like I would go, is probably Yeldon or Mixon. I mean Carson as well, but I'm not interested in Tevin Coleman. I'm not a Tevin Coleman.
I've chased him enough this season. It's going to hurt when he does break out. But like,
how many 3 seasons now?
Yeah. A couple of paydowns I don't mind, especially if you're on a full PPRs. Buck Allen on the Ravens, he's just fully involved in that offense, and he's a better price than Alex Collins. And then Carlos Hyde on the Browns. He's got, I think he has 100 rushing attempts to Todd Gurley's 101 rushing attempts, and they're number 1 and number 2. So the Browns are leading on him heavily. He's already got 5 rushing touchdowns, and a lot of them have been kind of like gimmies, but like that's his role in this offense. So, again, if the Browns are moving the ball on what I think is not a good defense, he could benefit.
Yeah, I'm not Chris Carter anytime soon. I feel like 2018 is Carlos Hyde's year. I mean, Nick Chubb is probably going to be the man in 2019, 2020. But Carlos Hyde, like, I mean, for the foreseeable future, for the rest of this season, I mean, he's a bell cow back on that offense. I like that call. He's really safe. And one guy that I do like in full PPR DraftKings, I like Nyheim Hines on Indiana on the Indiana Pacers on Indianapolis. He has hit the ground running as a rookie.
Yeah, huge usage for a guy who's only like 5'7".
Yep. Yeah,
like
and then
rushing the
what
ball.
do you think? I'm like, I keep looking at like Ronald Jones.
So here's the thing: everybody's trying to figure out who is the Bucks back to target this Falcons defense with. I don't see it happening. Like Ronald Jones is just not good at football. I don't think like he pop a long run here and there, and that was what he did at USC. Like he had some highlight reel long runs, and he goes out the window if they fall behind, which I think they do. Peyton Barber, he's just been so pedestrian. I mean, if they're in the game, okay, he might catch a couple passes too, but I don't know. Like if you're going to build, like I said, if you're building 50 lineups, like you probably want a couple of Barber shares and a couple of Jones shares, but uh, even in a good matchup, just too unpredictable.
Yeah, on the other side of things, though, on the other side, a really
Ito?
Wait, what'd you say?
Ito?
Yes, I think I think it's a really sharp play in
That's
a
interesting.
massive tournament because Devontae, I believe, is going to be out.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and it's also really encouraging that Smith was involved even when Freeman came back. He get like 20% of the carries. And that was what I forget, one of the Falcons beat reporters had reported that was their intention going into the game, was a 40-40-20 split. And that was exactly what they did. So we might see like a 60-40 split or something like that with Tevin Coleman.
And who was the third back there the last couple of years? I can't remember who it was.
Yeah, I forget.
But I do remember him having like some legitimate fantasy performances.
Some super long catches.
I'll have to look it up when you're like talking about
something Smith.
But yeah, like there is a path to success for Ito Smith, and he is. I mean, that's as far down salary wise.
He got a red zone carry and a touchdown in that 20% of carries.
Yeah, so I mean, like if you're looking way down low, I'm just kind of scrolling through. I mean, like like Duke Johnson is not a thing anymore. Jalen Richard. I mean, Duke Johnson did have that outstanding overtime game-winning drive for them to kick that pathetic field goal.
But that's where they've waited to use him, like when like he's fresh and the other team is tired. And
yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's not a bad call there to do that. But Mark Walton had a role on that team on Cincinnati. Richard. I mean, So yeah, I mean, Ito Smith. I
like that Ito call. I'm gonna mix him in for sure.
Yeah, might be worth a try.
All right, what about at wide receiver? We talked about a couple of the big names. Any other big names you're making sure to get in, like Antonio Brown?
I mean, yeah, like I love Antonio.
I feel like he's been such a forgotten man this season because he had a little bit of a slow start.
Yeah, and maybe he carries some momentum from his massive game last week. But Adam Thielen, like you got to keep riding that train, man. Like
for sure.
I mean, double-digit targets every week,
100 yards,
100 yards every week. I believe there was some like next gen stat about him. Oh, he leads the league in first as being the first look. Like, oh man, what podcast was I listening to? I want to give them credit for it. Oh, I think it was the DFS MVP with TJ Hernandez and whoever it was on this week. But yeah, like I and I'm butchering what they called it. It's like the first look. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like the quarterback's first read. For how somehow they can identify who the first read is. And he's leading the NFL in being the most first read receiver.
Interesting. Yeah, Diggs has had his moments, but Thielen's been the one dominating that wide receiver.
Like Arizona is scary. They're not a good football team, or at least they're not a good coached football team. And that said, I do think that defense is still, a force to be reckoned with. I know that defenses don't matter. However, I think that
they're good on outside receivers.
Right. Yes, this is not a plus. So guys, do not jam in Laquan Treadwell into your lineups. Do you hear me?
Well, there goes my builds. I got to start from scratch.
I know. I'm sorry, Mike. I'm sorry. But yeah, like Adam Thielen, I'm definitely liking. I mean, AJ Green can eat that pathetic Steelers secondary up, for sure. And then, in these high total games, I said it last week. And I'm going to say it again. In these massive high total games, I mean, one of the best things to do, at least to differentiate yourself a bit, it may not be like the most, optimal way to approach it, but one of the best things to do, if you're running multiple lineups, is just jamming in a bunch of the lower price guys in those games. So Mohamed Sanu, Deshaun Jackson, Calvin Ridley,
people are just going to be thinking about Ridley's, touchdowns. It's 3 touchdown game, and the other games he scored touchdown. They're just going to forget about Mo Sanu and what he can do underneath.
Absolutely.
And I mean, they're both good plays, but like Sanu should give you a little bit of safety where Ridley.
And then one more guy that I'm in love with this week that I think will go very low owned. He is a bit banged up, but I think it's just they're maintaining his health. Is DeAndre Hopkins against Buffalo. Buffalo is, according to Scott Barrett, last year he highlighted Keenan Allen going against Buffalo because they're very susceptible against middle of the field underneath routes. Among other routes, but that's one of their most susceptible routes. And he runs a high percentage of routes that Buffalo is weak against. I know that they're factoring in now Kiki Kuti and, obviously Will Fuller is healthy.
Will Fuller more than Hop.
But I do like Hopkins as an ultra talented ownership pivot off of guys like Antonio and AJ and Mike Evans. I mean, but Julio, goddamn man, like I'm just so ready for a 200-yard 2-touchdown game.
Yep. I do like Juju Smith-Schuster in that Steelers Bengals game. I think who is it that plays the slot for the Bengals? Denard. I think he's been pretty bad this season. He's like a very rigid corner, and he's just stuck in the slot because they've got 3 guys that should be on the outside. Juju could eat him up. Other guys I'd like, I'm really high on Smokey John Brown. Leads the league in air yards, like we talked about. Those are things that are pretty predictable week to week. So he's finally like getting solid targets to go along with the air yards, even though he only caught 4 passes last week. He had 14 targets. So the Titans, you can beat them deep. Their defense is also getting more credit than I think it deserves right now. They've played some fairly mediocre opponents. All of last year, they were just like an ATM versus number 1 wide receivers, guys that could beat you deep. Kenny Stills scored 2 touchdowns against them in week 1 this year. So John Brown, Ravens, I love his price. I love his upside. Any other receivers that I'm pretty high on? Like you mentioned, you got to get some Rams going with Goff if you're going to go that route. I think that's going to go very low owned given the whole no fly zone reputation. Even though right now it's a fly zone.
Yeah, and earlier in the week, man, and one thing that closed up, and you correct me if I'm wrong. All 3 of the Rams receivers are going to play. They're healthy, right?
So they haven't. The Cooks and Kupp need to get through the concussion protocol 100% to be cleared, but they were doing like their limited individual drills and stuff, which like is the step before getting cleared. So Sean McVay came out and said, I fully expect them to be cleared if they continue to progress, which basically means like, hey, they're playing Sunday.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's very certain that they're all going to play, but on Tuesday, when I'm like driving to work and sitting in traffic, I'm making lineups, and Monday and Tuesday, Josh Reynolds was my guy.
Yep.
And I was really, I mean, I don't want to say I was disappointed to see that Kupp and Cooks are going to play. Like, I want to see them play. I love that offense. I'm rooting for the Rams after they have been exorcised from Jeff Fisher's evil spirit. But I would love to see Josh Reynolds get a start and show his skill because he's a hell of a player.
Yeah, something to keep an eye on in case one of them does have a setback. A guy who is a pay down you could use in his place would be Tyler Boyd. Not quite his salary, but Boyd's been getting really solid targets, at least 7 targets in his last 4 games. And given the attention that the Steelers are likely to pay AJ Green, Boyd can do his thing underneath and give you a nice line there. Touchdown is a bit of a coin flip, but he should give you some catches and yardage.
Yeah, and then we didn't even mention Chris Godwin at 5,900 in that.
I'm going back and forth on Godwin. Like I love the talent. He's been so like they keep messing with his role and like using Adam Humphries, and I get Humphries has his usefulness in an NFL offense, but like you just want Godwin to be unleashed.
Yeah, it's gonna happen at some point. Like
so big and strong, fast.
Not look back. But I do agree with you that like Adam Humphries is kind of like hovering back there.
They just use him so much.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap with some tight ends, Fern. We mentioned it's a bit of a meat grinder as usual this season. What are you liking at tight end?
Yeah, so if I had to pick, gun to my head, Hooper or Brate, it would easily be Hooper. I just think that he is really coming into his own in this offense. I do think that, if Julio does what I and many people think he will do and just feasts on Sunday, that's not going to be good news for Hooper, because I think, when Julio feasts, it all just bottlenecks through him. I can see him getting like a 15 or 20 target game because he just destroys Tampa Bay. And I just don't see any reason why they wouldn't just pepper him with targets on Sunday. So, Hooper, according to UF Collective, wow. Okay, so he's the number 1 owned tight end for them as of now. But like I said, and I'm gonna say it again, like it is an easy pivot for me off these guys because of the volatility of tight end. So other than Eric Ebron, I'll just throw you 2 tight ends that interest me. The first one is David Njoku. I think that anyone who plays fantasy football for many years knows that a rookie quarterback's best friend is a big-bodied tight end, and Njoku is not only big-bodied, he's a freakish athlete as well, and he's getting a lot of targets now that Baker's in there.
Yeah, he's definitely more involved.
I like him a lot. And then one guy that I feel like he's due for a blow-up game here soon is Jordan Reed.
Yep.
And this is not my Redskins bias coming through. It's just he's an elite talent at tight end. And if he was on another team, right now the Redskins offense, I don't want to say it's broken. It's just really freaking boring.
Yep. He's the most likely person to catch a receiving touchdown.
Yes, that's
especially if Chris Thompson doesn't go.
Right. Yes. So yeah, I mean,
Do you have any news on Thompson, by the way?
I do not. I don't want to say that I don't want to speculate. But he was really banged up after that game, and early in the week it didn't look good. Let's see what's going on right now. Just on a quick Google search. I mean, you know, questionable. Adrian Peterson and Chris Thompson questionable. Yeah. If Adrian Peterson and Chris Thompson missed the game, that would, I don't even know what to think.
Capri Bibbs time.
Capri Bibbs.
Get out the Capri Suns.
Bibbs had that garbage time touchdown.
Yeah, he did. It sounds like AP's going to go. Like he was practicing limited, and like it was a pain tolerance thing, I believe, with the shoulder. But
yeah, he's a tough guy. Yeah, you know,
Jordan Reed. I like Reed a lot as a guy who could score a touchdown or even 2 touchdowns, because when he goes off.
And I have one more guy, but I don't want to steal your thunder.
All right, I'll hit mine real quick. And
I don't even know if you're going to say him. So if you don't say him, then.
So I like Trey Burton a lot. I don't think the Dolphins are good versus tight ends. I think they can take away some receiving options on the outside, and the Bears are starting to get Burton more involved. Being on the road, it's not a great spot, and that game's going to be kind of yucky with the pace the Dolphins play. But still, like you said, there's not much out there option wise. The other one I would point out would be CJ Uzomah. Tyler Eifert got hurt 2 weeks ago. Tyler Kroft is in a walking boot apparently this week. So even if he is able to play, like, you wouldn't expect him to be very involved. So Uzomah is a good athlete, and if he's getting the full run at tight end, the Steelers have been really bad against tight ends this year. Another kind of outlet option on the Bengals if AJ Green gets blanketed.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt that John Ross might not play too. So that's just one less mouth to feed.
But were either of those a guy you were going to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's Jared Cook, man. Jared Cook, baby. I honestly, like, I just try to go through narratives sometimes. And I said that going across the pond, in a foreign environment, a lot of travel, fatigued, just give the damn ball to your running back, let Chris Carson ball out. And I don't think that is the Raiders' MO. I could see the Seahawks just running the ball down the Raiders' throats. I feel like the Raiders, it would be smart of them to just let Derek Carr pepper, their big-bodied tight end, and just let him kind of, work down through the 20s. And I could see him having a double-digit target day. So I'm interested in Jared Cook as a tight end pivot. He is expensive. He's just $100 less than the slate leading Eric Ebron. Can you believe that, Mike? Did you ever think you'd see the day where Eric Ebron was the most expensive tight end on a main slate?
Not at all. That tells you everything you need to know about the tight end position in 2018.
Followed by Jared Cook, with right behind them is Jordan Reed and Kyle Rudolph. So there you go. Your top 4 tight ends for the week: Eric Ebron, Jared Cook, Jordan Reed, Kyle Rudolph, salary-wise, top 4 tight ends. And that, my friends, is the reason why you want to pivot at tight end, in my opinion.
Yep. Get weird with it.
We just don't have the Ertz or the Kelsey. I don't even want to say Gronk. I'm just going to say Ertz and Kelsey. We just don't have Ertz and Kelsey this week, and in the main slate. And yes, it's so tempting to go to the chalk because it's like, oh, this Atlanta and Tampa Bay game is a can't miss. But guys, we're talking about tight ends. We're not talking about top receivers here.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point about fading these guys.
Yes. Thank you.
All right.
What about defense? Other than the Bears, is there anyone that's interesting to you?
The Cowboys, I'm a little bit interested in.
Yeah, me too. I like that.
They're really cheap. The Browns, I don't hate. They're only a little bit more. Um, yeah, tough week for defense though. It's been such a hard year to pick defenses.
Yeah, you just got to target those teams that they're getting sacked a lot.
Yeah.
That the quarterbacks are getting pressured a lot. And the Dolphins play at such a low pace. Adam Gase is full of shit and said that they're going to play at like 70
Yeah, like a
plays per
double.
game. Whatever. What was it? 70 plays or something in the
Yeah.
preseason? That.
Yeah.
And what are they playing at now? Like 52?
Right. It's funny because they actually run no huddle, like one of the top 5 rates. They just don't hurry up. Like
That is so bizarre.
They get to the line and they stand there for 25 seconds.
Yeah, that's like leading the league in like fast breaks and like basketball. And then as soon as you get down there, you like run a Division II college offense and you're passing it around and shooting it with 1 second left on the shot clock. Like, come on, like you're running the hurry up. Let's go, And for Christ's sake, get Kenyon Drake in there, guys. Come on. I know Frank Gore needs to have his like most games started in a row record continued, and that's cool. But Kenyon Drake, just get the ball to the man. Come on, feed him. Let's go.
Yeah. The other defense I do have some interest in is the Ravens. On the road, it's a little tougher, but the Titans, they've been a train wreck this season despite their record, especially on offense. Mariota can throw some picks when he's not right. Who knows if he can grip a football at this point. So,
and I got one last one for you, and then we can go in any direction you want. After this, is according to UF Collective's ownership, guess who the lowest owned defense is slated to be? The Chargers against Cleveland. That's interesting to me. Like,
yeah,
I know that the Chargers
turned it over a little bit.
I know that they've been scuffling. I know. And I know that Joey Bosa is still out. But like they're facing a rookie quarterback, and I do believe that the Browns are a middle of the road team when it's all said and done, and they've got a bright future ahead of them if they can get a coaching staff that is, in the 21st century. They got some talent, but the idea that the Chargers would be the lowest owned defense, I don't know. Like they've been pretty bad.
They were top 5 coming into the year in most people's eyes.
Right. So, and it's only week 6, like things can turn around. So just keep that in mind. That said, ownership with defense, like quarterback, is extremely flat. So just because they're the lowest owned defense doesn't really mean too much.
Yep. Yeah. So that's what I got this week. Anything else you got, Fern?
No, I apologize. I keep forgetting to update my part of the cheat sheet. I promise I'm going to do it. Because I got some takes this week, Michael. I got some takes.
This is the week for it, man. You know what I went back and read was the piece you put out at the beginning of last season about mixing ownerships. By how many lineups you want to put in, because I feel like it's a good week to capitalize on doing some extra lineups, because it's a little bit of a shit show, kind of like last week. There's a few good spots, so just build around like some Falcons, and I feel like you can maximize your return this week with some good thinking and staying out of some traps.
Yeah, and one more thing I want to say, and it's kind of like a pep talk to anybody out there that hasn't cashed yet this year, or maybe is just struggling a bit, is this year has been chalk city.
Yep.
And for those of you watching this show, like if you're sitting here watching this live, or you just watch us at all, like odds are you are a DFS degenerate. Odds are that you play fantasy pretty seriously, and odds are because of that you try to get really creative in your lineup construction. You're not just like on Sunday morning reading some like generic article and just jamming in the chalk. The chalk is killing it this year, and this is the time of year where that begins to change. When the injuries start piling up, when coaches start changing up their schemes and, their hierarchies of who gets the targets and who gets the touches, this is when the diligent people who think for themselves start winning big money. And so just hold strong. It's only week 6. And now that these bye weeks are coming, this is where you're going to get your edge.
Yeah, the league catches up.
Absolutely.
So, all right, Fern, thanks for joining me. Everybody, good luck this week.
All right, Mikey. Take care, pal.
Take care.